Welcome back to the realm of Buddhist Audio Bookshelf. Today marks our continuation through Dharma Talks by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Geoffrey DeGraff. Engage deeper with these insightful teachings alongside us. Crafted meticulously by the team at Buddhist Audio Bookshelf, this audiobook serves to disseminate Buddha's wisdom. Your backing in proliferating these teachings is pivotal. Subscribe, like, and share to broaden the impact of these transformative messages. Let's collectively foster a world enriched by the profound guidance of Buddha. Relax and absorb, allowing these teachings' essence to resonate within as we traverse this enlightening path. Let's get started with, stay tuned. October 9, 2007. Try to tune in on the breath. There are different ways you can do this. You can start out by thinking about the breath. You might have a mental picture with the energy flowing through the body, around the body. Or you can tune into the feeling of the breath. Like a vapor of alcohol, it can't be contained. It has no clear boundaries. It flows through the body, around the body. So allow your mind to tune into the lightness of the breath in the same way that you tune a radio to a specific station. This is called tuning into the level of form. The mind can experience 3 levels of becoming. There's the level of sensuality, where you're focused on your desire for sights, sounds, smells, tastes, or tactile sensations. There's the level of form, which is primarily your inner sensation of the body, how the body feels from inside, and this is defined in 4 terms. In terms of the breath, in terms of earth, water, fire. In other words, breath is a sense of motion or energy, earth is the solidity, water is the coolness, the liquid sensations, and fire is the warmth. That's form. Then there is the formless level, which covers things like space or awareness. And you can tune into any of these. They are here all the time. It's a question of which one you choose to focus on, which one you want to stay with. It's like setting up a TV set, an AM/FM radio, and a shortwave radio here in the sala. You realize there are lots of waves coming through the sala right now. The TV station waves, the AM/FM radio waves, the short waves, and you could choose to tune into any of them. They're all here. It's simply a question of which one you are going to choose. And our minds tend to be channel surfers. We jump from one to the other, sometimes TV, sometimes radio, different channels, different radio stations. If we keep jumping around like this, we just pick up bits and snatches of things. We don't hear or see anything all the way through. This is why we have to choose to stay consistently with one level of becoming. So let's focus on the body in and of itself, the sensation of having a body here right now, the sensation of warmth, coolness, motion, solidity. Try to stay focused on that level. Any images or sensations or notions from other levels, just let them go, let them pass. They are going to be here, but you don't have to focus on them. Stay consistently with a sense of the body, how you're feeling it from the inside. And hang on right there. As we do this, we're creating a state of becoming. That's what the path is all about. You create the path, you bring it into being. This is one of the paradoxes of the Buddha's whole teaching. On the one hand, we're trying to overcome craving for becoming, which is one of the causes of suffering. But the path we follow is one that brings something into being. We do some becoming, but it's a tactical sort of thing. As you stay consistently with the breath, you start to understand things better, you see things more clearly. It's like tuning into one channel or one radio station and just staying there. If there's music, you hear the piece all the way through. If there's a discussion, you hear the discussion from beginning to end. In other words, you know things all the way from cause to effect. That's how you give rise to the discernment that will set you free. The Buddha uses a different analogy. Of course, in those days they didn't have radio stations, so his analogy is planting a seed in a field. The field here is your karma. The fact that you've got a body sitting here right now, that's a result of past karma. The seed is your consciousness, your awareness. And for any seed to grow, of course, you've got to plant it in one place. You don't move it around. Planting it here today, then digging it up tomorrow, moving it someplace else, you'll never get the plant you want. So you stay in one place. And then once the seed is in place, you water it. You water it with delight. In other words, the practice of concentration has to be something you like to do. This is why it's important when you meditate, when you're trying to develop a state of concentration, that you choose an object you like. Or you can take the most common object, which is the breath, and you make it into something you like. In that way the state of becoming grows. So the field here is the sense of the body from within. The seed of consciousness is focused on one spot in the body. The essence of what it means to have a state of becoming is that you choose a location to stay focused. And because you want this one to develop, you don't go channel surfing. You don't go moving your seed around along with your mood. You choose a place and then stick with it, and then you water it with delight. In the beginning, the delight is simply the sense of interest that comes from exploring what it feels like to inhabit the body, what this breath energy is that we keep talking about, what's earth, what's water, what's fire. It sounds like primitive chemistry, but it's not. It's more like giving us a vocabulary to help you see and describe things inside, the same way that professional tasters need a detailed vocabulary to describe all the variations of taste. The more complete your vocabulary, the more you start seeing, the more you start sensing. It's the same with the breath, and the same with all the elements of body. Try to use this vocabulary as a way of classifying the different sensations you feel as you explore the body from within. What's the difference between breath sensation, say, as opposed to liquid sensations? The more precisely you can detect the breath in this way, the more precisely you can choose the right point to focus. Then you just plant your seed right there. In other words, you stay right there. You don't move around. Then try to develop your sense of delight by exploring how you can make the breath energy feel good in the different parts of the body. How you can use the breath energy to soothe away pains, tension, or tightness in different parts of the body. In this way, the delight turns into not simply interest, but a sense of real pleasure, gratification from being on this level of form. And try to establish a sense of oneness with the breath. This is important. When the Buddha describes the different levels of jhana, he talks about singleness of preoccupation as being common to all of them. In other words, you're focused on one thing, but your relationship to the object changes. In the first jhana, you're thinking about the object, and you're evaluating it. So even though you're with one object, there's not yet a sense of being totally one with it. The mind is hovering around it, trying to adjust it, trying to get it so that it's really just right. Then, when it's just right, you go into it. You enter into the breath. Your sense of awareness, your consciousness, is firmly planted in the soil. Your awareness is firmly planted in the breath. You feel like you're surrounded by breath, you're one with the breath. And then you try to maintain that sense of oneness. You don't have to think much about it, you don't have to evaluate much anymore. Just stay with that sense of oneness. The breath will start changing. It'll grow more calm, more balanced throughout the body, until the breath energy throughout the whole body feels like one single connected sensation. As it grows more and more still, you take this sense of oneness, and then you can apply it to other things, like space. This is where you move into the formless realms. The infinitude of space, the infinitude of consciousness, that's as far as the oneness can take you. Then you have to drop the oneness to get to the state of nothingness. In other words, the oneness of the knowing gets put aside. This is how you tune into the formless realms. So you start by trying to take this seed of your awareness and planting it very firmly in the sense of the body, just in and of itself, as you're experiencing it from within. Give rise to the state of becoming right here, on the level of form. Or, to switch back to the radio analogy, stay tuned to this station. Even though there may be other waves going through the air, other waves going through the building, you're going to stay on this frequency, so that the mind moves in unison with this frequency. The longer you stay here, the better chance you have of seeing things clearly. This is why we have to bring the state of becoming into being. This is why the path, even though it ultimately leads beyond becoming, has to make use of Becoming to go beyond. Because while you do this, you start understanding. What is the process of becoming? What is this karma that forms the field? What is the consciousness that forms the seed? What's the delight that keeps it watered? And because you're still, you can see these things in action. You can see the slightest movements of the mind. When there's a sense of ease and well-being, the mind begins to open up, so that whatever insights it gains go really deep and change things inside. But your duty for now is to stay tuned, stay planted right here. Learn how to take delight in the station you're tuned to, take delight in the fact that you're on the right path, because that delight is what makes the path grow. A Mind Like Wind. November 17, 2007. When you come to the monastery, you tend to bring a lot of other things trailing in your wake. You sit down and they gather around you. Issues from your family, issues from work, issues from home, and issues from the media. If you want to create some space for the mind, you have got to cut these things away. This is why meditation starts by establishing a frame of reference. You start out with the body in and of itself. In other words, you're not thinking of your body in the world, whether it's a good-looking body or not, whether it's strong or weak one, agile or clumsy. All of those issues relate to the body in the world. You want to avoid them because it's very easy to slip from there into other world issues. What other people are thinking, what other people are doing, what you think about their thinking, what you think about their doing. You want to be able to cut through these things, so keep reminding yourself you're going to stay with the body in and of itself. You've got the breath right here. That's a body issue in and of itself. Learn how to relate to the breath in a friendly way. That makes it easier to stick with it. Learn how to be sensitive to how it feels when it's long, how it feels when it's short, and decide which kind of breathing feels best for you right now. You can choose, you know. The breath, after all, is a bodily fabrication that has an element of intention in it. So take advantage of that. As the breath gets more comfortable, you can start thinking about being aware of the whole body as you breathe in and as you breathe out. This helps you move into the present moment with a sense of belonging here. You're not squeezed out of the present by being confined to just one little part of the body. You can inhabit the whole body and simply stay right here, allowing the breath to calm down. You don't force it to calm down, but as you're trying to be aware of the whole body, you're not thinking about other things. The more you can inhabit the present moment like this, the harder it is to switch off to the past or the future. It's almost as if you have your hands and feet nailed down so you can't go running off anywhere else. And that way the breath can calm down naturally because you're thinking less, so you're using less oxygen. The thinking is focused right here, on the body in and of itself. Ajahn Lee compares this kind of thinking to grabbing hold of a post and running around it. As long as you hold on to the post, then no matter how much you run around, you don't get dizzy. But if you let go of the post and try to spin around, you get dizzy and fall down. So hold on to the post of the breath, and your thinking can circle around the breath. Just be careful that it doesn't lose its frame of reference and go running off into the world. This is called establishing mindfulness or establishing a frame of reference. Once it's established, you develop it by holding on to that frame of reference as other things come up. You're aware of things arising and you're aware of things staying and passing away, but you don't lose touch with your body. If a thought comes up, see how it relates to the body. What feelings arise in the body together with the thought? What feelings pass away when the thought passes away? This is a useful insight. You see what you do as you're thinking. In order to stay, a thought has to have its little niche there in the body, a spot with a little bit of tension that you associate with the thought as a reminder, a kind of marker, that that's the thought you're going to stay with. When you see this happening, learn how to breathe through that little niche of tension. Then the thought will go away. Then you can carry this skill out into other activities as well, as you're walking around the monastery, as you're doing chores or interacting with other people. Try to stay with the body as your frame of reference, how it feels to be in the body when you're talking, when you're walking, when other people say things that you react to. Look for the reaction primarily in its physical side. how it influences the body and how it affects the body. That gives you a handle on how to deal with issues that come up in the mind. There's a passage in the canon where the Buddha's teaching Rahula how to meditate, and he starts out by telling him to meditate with a mind like earth. When people spit on the earth doesn't get disgusted. When people put flowers on the earth doesn't get delighted or elated. It just stays right there. Or, you can meditate with a mind like fire. Fire will burn up disgusting things, and it will burn up nice things, and not really feel one way or another, liking or disliking the things it burns. Or meditate with a mind like water. Water will wash away clean things, it'll wash away fragrant smelling things, it'll wash away foul smelling things, but whatever it's washing away, the water doesn't give rise to likes or dislikes. Or meditate with a mind like wind. The wind will blow nice things and bad things away. It will blow ash over here from the fires. It will blow the smell of a flower, but it doesn't feel one way or the other about what it's blowing. So where do you get in touch with earth, fire, water, and wind? Right here in the body. The body is made out of these same sensations. Solidity, liquidity, warmth, movement and energy. They're all right here in the body. So take your cue from the body. When there's a disturbance in the body, realize it. There may be a change in your heart rate, a change in feelings of tension or tightness in different parts of the body. Remind yourself that these things may be the result of the mind's actions that spread into the body. These things can take hold if we allow them to stay in the body. But you can adjust them, zap them, with your breath. So, this is one way of dealing with recurring thoughts. As soon as you sense the tension or the reaction, just undo it. Try to breathe in a way that allows the blood to flow smoothly at all times, so you're not reacting to things outside. In one sense, it helps you take possession of the present moment, so you really feel like you belong here. You're not being pushed out by other people's actions. At the same time, you give yourself a stronger position from which to look at your reactions. When you react with disliking, liking, desire, or fear, exactly what's going on. These things gain a lot of power because they have their physical component as well as their mental component, but if you defuse the physical component, those thoughts are a lot easier to look at. They're a lot less overwhelming. Then you can start looking at the stories behind them. Say somebody gets you angry. What are the stories you tell yourself about that person? About how that person should be acting and why he isn't acting the way you want him to. Learn to look at those stories with a skeptical eye. Sometimes you hear the idea that when you meditate you're supposed to practice radical acceptance, as if that's what the path were all about. While you accept what's actually going on, you've got to do a lot more. You've got to learn how to be skeptical about what's going on as well. These stories that the mind tells itself. Why believe them? What do you gain by believing them? Are they really true? How much do you know about their truth? Even if they are true, are they really beneficial? You've got to have a certain skeptical ear as you listen to these thoughts, and a skeptical eye as you observe what they're doing. It's only with this measure of skepticism that you can begin to recognize your defilements for what they are. The sense of being at ease in the body helps keep that skepticism from becoming bitter or cynical. Simply learn to put a question mark next to things. Is that really true? Is it really beneficial? Is this really the right time to be thinking that thing? Why should I believe that story if it makes me suffer? In this way, you learn how to free yourself from a lot of influences that otherwise would take over your mind and then stay there ensconced for days on end. This ability to be a little bit skeptical can keep you sane in the midst of all the insanity going on around us. I was talking with a yoga teacher today who said that her clients were all saying they wished it were January 1st, that they were done with the holidays. All the Christmas stuff is very stressful for a lot of people. It's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be joyful, but it's just a lot of stress and a lot of hassle. She wanted to know what to tell her students. I said to tell them to approach the whole thing like an anthropologist, watching the quaint customs of the natives and allowing yourself to stand apart from them a little bit. This is what being with the body, trying to get in touch with just the physicality of the body, trying to maintain that mind state that's like earth, water, wind, and fire can do for you. It gives you a good solid place to stand, a separate place to stand, a place where you've got your internal sense of well-being. You're not hungering after the things of the world, so you don't have to gobble them down. You can question them. This way you establish a sense of seclusion. When they talk about the happiness of jhana being based on seclusion, this is the kind of seclusion they're talking about. You're not only sitting here separated from society at large, but you're also standing apart a bit from your thoughts. You've got a different frame of reference that allows you to question the stories and not identify with them so much. So, develop a mind like fire, wind, earth, and water, a mind that's in tune with the body as you're experiencing it right here, right now, and particularly with the breath, which is part of the wind element. If there are any aberrations in the breath, put a little question mark next to them. Does it have anything to do with a mental event that just happened? Is there any reaction going on, any anger, any lust, any fear? Then breathe through the aberration. If it's necessary to deal with the thought, okay, you're dealing with it from a much better perspective. You've got a different frame of reference from which to look at the thought. If you don't have to deal with it, that's fine. Just breathe through it and let it go. If you have trouble analyzing the thought, maybe your concentration isn't strong enough for it yet, so learn how to put the thought aside. The important thing is that your frame of reference be strong, solid, and imperturbable. This is why mindfulness practice shades ultimately into concentration practice, because you're sticking with one thing as your frame of reference, and it becomes continual. The Buddha himself never drew a sharp line between mindfulness and concentration. Mindfulness as it grows stronger becomes concentration. It becomes purified in concentration, steadied so that your discernment can start doing its work, figuring out where there are still Velcro hooks on your mind, and how you can shave them off, not getting snagged and sucked into the storylines that make you suffer. So, learn to see the body, your experience of the body, largely as breath. Then make your mind like breath. When they come together in this way, you've got a really solid place to stand. Right view. November 20, 2007. The discourse we chanted just now, setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion, starts with the whole Noble Eightfold Path, and then goes into right view. And that's all it discusses in detail. Right view, going through the Four Noble Truths. Simply listening to this talk on right view, one of the five brethren had his first taste of the deathless, or, as they say, experienced the arising of the Dhamma I. So right view is important. As one analysis of the path says, three qualities circle around every factor of the path. One is right view. The second is right effort. The third is right mindfulness. So try to make sure that these three qualities are circling around your practice right now. There are basically four truths covered by right view. First is the truth of suffering or stress. Dukkha is the Pali term. Sometimes we're told that the first truth is that life is suffering or everything is suffering, but that's not the case. The Buddha said basically that there is suffering. It's one of four things you're going to encounter that you should pay attention to. You might be able to argue with the idea that life is suffering, but you can't argue with the idea that there is suffering. You see it all around you. You see it inside you as well. The Buddha is simply asking you to take it seriously. To take suffering seriously means that you should learn how to comprehend it. To do that, you have to put yourself in a position where you can watch it, to see how it comes, see how it goes, see what comes and goes along with it. The coming and going along with it. That's essentially what the word samudaya, usually translated as cause or origination, means. You want to see that every time that there's real suffering in the mind, there's an element of craving, three kinds of craving to be specific. Craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. Craving for sensuality is easy enough to explain. The desire to have sensual desires. That's one of the most interesting parts of the analysis. That sensual attachment is not so much to things out there, we're more attached to our plans for things out there. Are scheming for things out there, for pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations. We spend a lot more time planning and working toward these things than we actually do in tasting them. Many times the taste is very fleeting. Think about the food we eat. Exactly how long does it really taste good in your mouth? Look at that little burst of taste. And then think of how much work goes into buying the food, preparing the food, cleaning up after the meal. Of course we do it for more than just the taste, we do it to keep the body going. But there's an awful lot of energy expended in the idea, let's make this taste really good, and then it's gone. We're actually more attached to our plans for these things, our desires for these things, than we are to the things themselves. It's easy enough to replace a desire for one thing with a desire for something else. It's hard to drop desire entirely. That's one of the causes of suffering. Another cause is craving for becoming. You want to become something, to take on a particular identity, within a particular world. We choose our worlds, you know. The context in which we see ourselves, the context in which we move and exert an influence. These two things are entwined. Both the world in which we have a self and the sense of self itself. Sometimes this world is on the sensual level. Sometimes it's on the level of form, as when we're meditating and fully inhabiting the form of the body. Sometimes it's on the formless level, any abstraction, anything without a form. And again, we tend to go from one of these types of becoming to another to another to another. This is what the wandering on is all about. We go from one bhava, one state of becoming, to another. These are the locations that the mind focuses on. And we suffer from this because none of these locations can last, none of these positions can last. Whatever we latch onto as a self, it just keeps melting away. The world around us just keeps melting away. Then there's craving for non-becoming, the desire to destroy whatever you've got, whatever you identify yourself with. Or you want to destroy the world around you. It's unpleasant. You don't like it. You want to get rid of it, which can either be an external destructive urge or an internal destructive urge. Paradoxically, this type of craving leads to becoming as well. Why is that? Because in taking on the identity of the destroyer, you're assuming another identity. In taking delight in the idea of destruction, you're watering the sense of identity. You're watering a sense of being. The Buddha's image is of a seed planted in the ground. The seed is your consciousness. The ground is your karma, past and present, as it's manifesting right now. Then there's the delight in doing something with it, either creating something out of it or destroying it. All of that counts as a cause of suffering. It may sound pretty abstract, but as you get to know the mind, you begin to sense the movement as it's going one of these directions or another. Toward becoming or non-becoming. In one sense we're in a double bind. The desire to get rid of becoming itself is a way of creating becoming, but this is where the Buddha's genius as a strategist comes in. He says that you go beyond becoming not by destroying becoming, but by learning how to create new forms of becoming that are more skillful, particularly the becoming of concentration, getting the mind to settle down and be in one spot. As long as you're going to have a location, have a solid steady location, because it's a blameless way of giving rise to happiness. Then, when you can see things clearly, you can simply let the processes of becoming go. Sometimes you hear about the dangers from being stuck on concentration. But if you look through the texts, the Buddha talks about them only in very rare cases. He mentions the dangers of delighting in the state of equanimity, or of not wanting to go beyond a particular state, but these are pretty harmless, pretty minor, compared to the dangers of staying stuck in sensuality. The Buddha gave long discourses about all the suffering and conflict that come from sensual craving. You have to work hard, and sometimes you don't gain anything from working hard. Or, even when you do gain things, they don't really stay with you. As the Buddha says, sometimes fire burns them, water washes them away. Thieves or kings will make off with them. I like that. Pairing thieves with kings or hateful heirs make off with them. It's because of sensual craving that there are conflicts within the family, conflicts among nations. This is why we go to war. I don't think that anyone has ever gone to war over attachment to jhana, attachment to concentration. We kill, steal, have illicit sex, lie to each other, indulge in intoxicants, all because of sensual craving, sensual attachment, none of which happens because of our attachment to jhana. The only danger of being stuck on jhana is that as long as you're stuck, you don't gain awakening. So jhana is a relatively blameless form of happiness. It gives us nourishment on the path, and at the same time is a very transparent form of becoming. We watch ourselves doing it because we have to do it so carefully. This is where the mindfulness comes in. That's one of the definitions of mindfulness in the canon. Being very meticulous. The more meticulous you are, the better you remember things. You need to be very meticulous in keeping something in mind in order to maintain your concentration. This is one of the functions of right mindfulness. Once you've entered into a skillful mental state, mindfulness enables you to keep remembering to stay there. If you're meticulous in doing this, you begin to see more clearly exactly what's involved in getting the mind to settle down. This is why jhana is a transparent form of becoming. As you watch it, you begin to understand what becoming is all about. You can begin to identify which part of the practice is based on old karma, which part is based on new karma, which part is based on your present consciousness, and all the other things that go along with it, and which part of it is watered by the sense of delight. So the trick here is that once you've learned how to do this, the Buddha says, you learn how to see things simply as they have come to be. In other words, you just look at what past karma is being offered up to you right now. Our instinctive reaction always is to make something out of it, to do something with it. But to watch it simply as it comes into being without trying to create something out of it, without trying to destroy it, without even taking delight in the equanimity of watching it. That's the hard part. It's pretty easy to get into a state of equanimity just watching these things, but it takes a lot of insight to realize that equanimity itself is a kind of doing. It's a way of creating something out of your experience, something you can delight in. So this goes deeper than just plain equanimity. The Buddha says you have to learn how not to make anything out of anything, even out of the jhana, even out of your strong concentration. When you can do that, you can break through to the deathless. So instead of just operating on the desire to get rid of things, we first learn how to create something really skillful out of them. This is the basic pattern of the Buddha's path. The fourth noble truth is to give rise to skillful states in the mind, so you can understand what's involved in giving rise to a state. Then you get more sensitive to exactly what in the present moment is the given, and what part's being added. In general, we're very ignorant of what we're adding to things. Yet even our normal experience of space and time is something that has already been added to. The aggregates come in a potential form, and then based on which things we're interested in, which things we want to create, which things we want to destroy, we actually create our experience of the present out of these different potentials. So we have to do a lot of digging down in our experience of the present moment to see what's just the potential without anything added at all, not even equanimity. This requires that we get the mind really still and really alert and really interested in what it's doing. This is how right view hovers around the meditation. Right effort and right mindfulness hover along with it. You try to give rise to what's skillful no matter what the situation. That's the right effort. Right mindfulness means being mindful to give rise to what's skillful, to abandon what's unskillful, and once you've entered into what's skillful, being mindful to stay with it. It's all very proactive, but it's proactive in a transparent way. This is why, when you begin to delve into right view, you realize that it covers the whole path. It's not just a matter of understanding something in an abstract way. It's learning how to see things in a new light, and then acting on what you've seen in an appropriate way. It's not just a theory, it's a guide to action. And while we're sitting here getting the mind to settle down and be still, Ajahn Lee's image is that it's like having a chicken that lays eggs. You eat some of the eggs to keep yourself nourished, and you take the eggs apart to see what eggs are made of, what their parts are. Or you watch how they develop. The analogy breaks down there, but ultimately you get to the point where you don't need the eggs anymore, either for the nourishment or for the purpose of your investigation. That's when you put the path aside. Even right view gets put aside. That's when you experience the noble truth of cessation. But in the meantime, you want to make sure that right view is always there, hovering around your meditation to keep it on course, and to make sure that what you're doing is transparent to you. That's how the process of becoming in concentration leads to something that goes beyond becoming, where there's no suffering at all. And that, as the Buddha said, is the end of the problem. Good and bad meditation. February 6, 2008. Meditation is supposed to work. It's supposed to make a difference. That's why we do it. So why do we sometimes hear that there's no such thing as good or bad meditation? Part of the reason is that when you start out meditating, you're not a good judge of what's good and what's bad. This is a problem with meditators everywhere. If you're not familiar with the territory of the mind, you can't tell a step forward from a step back. And if you're tied up in the problems of conceit, it makes things even more difficult. If what looks like a step forward is happening, you can get puffed up, proud, and complacent. If what looks like a step back happens, you get depressed. Either that or you go into denial. Which is why, at the very beginning, you're told not to pass judgment on your meditation. Just do it. This is especially true when you go to a place where everybody who walks in the door is taught meditation right away. They can't assume that you have the maturity or the experience needed to judge your meditation. But ideally, you should be developing the qualities as you meditate that will eventually put you in a position where you can pass judgment in a skillful way. And it should be the purpose of the meditation teacher to put you in the position where you don't need a meditation teacher anymore. The other day, I was talking to a friend who made the comment that it takes people 20, 30 years to be able to judge their own meditation. That struck me as scary, because if after 20 years you can't tell when you're making progress or not, there's got be something wrong with the meditation. Meditation should develop the mental skills and qualities that make you a good judge of your progress. In the beginning, it's good as to sit with whatever comes up, because one of the attitudes and skills you need to be a meditator is patience. You're able to sit with whatever happens. Whether it looks good or looks bad, you can sit with it. You can watch it. The purpose is not that you're just going to sit there and say, well, this is as good as it's going to ever get, so I might as well accept it and be happy with this. That's a very defeatist attitude. The purpose of patience is so you can watch and learn. The more patient you are, the more things you'll be able to see, because you can sit with whatever comes up. This is why the Buddha taught Rahula meditation on the elements. Make your mind like water, make your mind like wind, make it like fire, make it like earth. These things have no preferences. They are willing to wash away anything, good or bad, blow away anything, good or bad, burn anything or have anything thrown on them, good or bad, with no sense of revulsion or delight. They don't make choices as to what's nice and what's not. Now, the purpose of making your mind like this is not to make it a clod of dirt. It's to enable you to see what's going on steadily, consistently, over a long period of time. This is because the insight we're after here is not simply that things are inconstant, but that there's a pattern to their inconstancy. You want to be able to see that pattern all the way, from cause to effect and from effect back to cause. That requires that your gaze be steady and consistent. It's like having measuring equipment in a scientific experiment. To begin with, you want the equipment to be set on a solid table, set on a solid floor in a solid building on a solid piece of land. That way, if there's a little squiggle in the recording stylus, it actually has something to do with the experiment. It is not a result of the tables wobbling or the buildings wobbling or a tremor underground. In addition, you want the stylus to keep writing continually. You don't want there to be a gap, say, from 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. Your experiment is a long-term experiment, and you want it to be 24/7. That's the kind of solidity and consistency you want in your mind in order to be able to see what's going on, so that when things are good, bad, or indifferent, you can stay right here. The other quality that makes you a good observer is honesty. Whatever comes up, you're going to admit that it's come up. You're not going to go into denial and you're not going to embellish it, make it more than what it really is. This is the foundation for a really scientific attitude toward the meditation. Sometimes you hear of specific methods as being scientific, that they've worked everything out, all the steps, and all you have to do is follow the steps. They even have all the questions and answers on cards, they have standard meditation talks. Everybody gets put through the same process. That's scientific in the same way that an assembly line is scientific, but it doesn't mean that the workers on the assembly line are going to be scientific, or they understand anything of what's going on. The process is too mechanical. That's not the science that the Buddha was teaching. He was teaching how to experiment, how to take joy in finding things out, which means that sometimes you do what you're told in the meditation, and sometimes you do what you're not told, so you can see what happens. Once you've got those qualities of honesty and patience under your belt, you can start playing around. Kurt Vonnegut once made the observation that scientists are basically little kids, and little kids like to play. Scientists like to play. They get grants and fellowships so that they can play big time. And of course, we hope that their playing will have some payoff. There are whole branches of science whose pragmatic payoff is not immediately evident. But it's good to have people experimenting, trying to figure things out, because you never know when a chance discovery is going to be valuable. And so it is with the meditation. When the Buddha taught, he taught techniques that opened things up to questions. It wasn't that everything was all certain and mapped out, and that all you have to do is follow the steps A, B, C, D down the line. He would try to provoke questions in the mind. How do you breathe in a way that calms the effect of the breath on the body? Are you aware of the whole body when you breathe in and breathe out? After you've answered the Buddha's questions, you can start asking questions of your own. There's a pain in your legs. How do you breathe so as to minimize the pain, or to at least put you in a position where you're not feeling threatened by the pain? I've often found in my own practice that a particular blockage in the body suddenly makes the meditation really interesting. Once, in my first year, I had a problem with my foot. I spent hours breathing in different ways to see how it affected the pain in the foot, and I learned a lot more from that pain than I did from a pile of Dhamma books. So this is the Buddha's approach to meditation. He would make sure you have the right personal qualities, that you could be trusted to conduct experiments and be more or less objective about the results, and then he would set you loose. Sometimes, as with many scientific experiments, you may follow a line of inquiry, but it leads nowhere. Well, you've learned something. You've learned that that particular line of inquiry goes nowhere. Then you follow other lines of inquiry, and then others, until you find something that really does open things up in the mind. So this is where having a sense of good and bad meditation finally does become useful. In one sense, every meditation is good if you bring the right attitude to it, regarding it as an opportunity to learn. With that approach, bad is bad only in the sense that a particular line of reasoning doesn't go where you want it, or a particular approach doesn't really give you any real knowledge. But when you start getting sloppy, when you start assuming things that you shouldn't assume, feeling certain about things that are still uncertain, in other words, making the same kind of mistakes that a bad scientist might make, that's meditation that's really bad. Sometimes you can see it. Sometimes there are cases where, fairly well into the meditation, you still need to talk things over with a teacher. But you want to get so that you can pass judgment on things in a judicious way, i.e., you're no longer judgmental, but you use your powers of judgment wisely, precisely, accurately, with real wisdom. You're responsible for your meditation. And once you accept that attitude of responsibility, you become a lot more careful, a lot more mature. You don't blindly hope that the method on its own is going to carry you through. Your method will carry you through if you're alert and watchful and judicious in the ways you apply the method. That's when the meditation gets good. Sweat the small stuff. February 28, 2008. In the course of our training, there are a lot of little things that we have to pay attention to, because if you don't pay attention to the little things, you miss the big things. Ajahn Mun once made a comment that it's very rare for a person to be blinded by a log. It's a lot more common for people to be blinded by sawdust. In other words, the fact that you're not paying attention to the little things can blind you. This is an important principle in the practice. We're dealing with a large issue: suffering. But you're not going to see suffering if you just think about large issues all the time. When you're thinking about large issues, you're dealing in abstractions. And sometimes the abstractions can get too big to handle. The biggest abstraction is this sense of I am. I am a good person, I am a bad person. If you feel that you're a bad person, you've got a lot of work to do to find the root of that badness. Most of us go swinging back and forth, feeling that we are perfectly fine, then we run across something that shows that we're not perfectly fine, so we run off in the other direction. We're miserable, we're hopeless. But neither attitude is helpful on the path. This is why the Buddha, when he was about to teach his son, Rahula, how to meditate, even before he taught him the steps to breath, meditation told him to focus on the inconstancy of things, so as to undercut the conceit, I am. In other words, as you look at your own mind, you begin to realize that there are good intentions mixed up with bad intentions. If you look at the details, it's not a question of your having an underlying nature that's good or an underlying nature that's bad. You want to get away from the abstraction of underlying nature and simply look at what's going on. By paying attention to the moments when you catch yourself being unskillful, you work with that particular intention. You don't have to deal with your entire character all at once. Just see what's happening right here, right now, with that particular lack of skillfulness, because you can deal with individual events. They're not too much. They're not overwhelming. And as you develop this quality of being meticulous, you actually accomplish the training. You're developing the qualities needed for the path. When we hear the word conceit, as in the conceit that I am, we usually think of it as meaning that we feel better than other people. But in the Buddhist sense of the term, it means any way that you compare yourself, set up yourself as an entity that is either good or bad in comparison with other people. It could be the feeling that you're worse than they are, or even that you're equal to them. Those are also conceits. And the conceit that you've got a really big issue you've got to deal with here, and you don't have time for the small issues. That really gets in the way. So in this sense, the humility that's required to say, yeah, I can change myself in meaningful ways through the small issues. I can change my habits, the habits of the mind here, by attending to the details. That's the attitude that will see you through. That's the kind of humility you want. It's not the humility of saying that you're bad, because that's not really humility at all. Genuine humility is the humility that's willing to learn from the little things. That's what's useful in the practice. Because after all, the movements of the mind, what are they if not very little things? They're so quick that you can hardly notice them. This is one of the reasons why we deal with the little things on the external level first. Look at all the rules for the monks. 2 big volumes, and that's just the distilled version. All the way from the big rules like not killing and not stealing down to the little rules like how to take care of your bowl, how to take care of your robe. And as Ajahn Suwat once pointed out, the rules are not just for the monks. Many of the monks' rules affect the way lay people are going to be interacting with the monks, in which case the lay people have to notice, is this particular issue going to touch on a monk's rule or not? In that way the rules make the lay people more meticulous as well. So as you learn to be observant of the little things around you, you're more likely to observe the little things inside. The little changes of the breath that indicate that greed has arisen, or anger has arisen, or fear has arisen. All too often we're aware of these emotions only after they've taken over the mind. But to deal with them most effectively, you want to be able to sense them just as they're getting started. And that requires that you be very sensitive to the subtleties of the breath, the subtleties of the feelings in the body that tend to go along with these emotions, so that you can catch them in time. This is why focusing on the small things is not a distraction. I once encountered a person who had been trained in a Zen center who complained about our obsession with minuti, as he called it. He saw it as a distraction from the big wide open emptiness, the big wide open liberation that's waiting when you stop focusing on little things. But it doesn't work that way. To see the deathless, you have to be very precise in your powers of perception. After all, the deathless is always there. Why are we not seeing it? Because we're not sensitive enough. How do we become more sensitive? By focusing on the little things. Those little movements of the mind that head off in a skillful or unskillful direction. How do you nurture the skillful ones and how do you get rid of the unskillful ones? That's the big question. So if you're dealing only with larger abstractions, you're going to miss the details because the larger abstractions say that the big deals are more important. There's that saying, don't sweat this small stuff, and it's all small stuff. Well, there's some small stuff you gotta sweat. Humility is a lesson. Humility is the quality that allows you to admit that there are lots of little things you've got to learn. You don't let yourself feel exasperated if they seem elementary or if you find yourself going back to the beginning again and again. Each time you go back to the beginning, you learn new things. It's like going back and reading Ajahn Lee. I've personally found that with many of his writings, if you go back and read them again after a month or two, you see new things. It's the same book, but you're a different person. You notice different details. The same principle applies to the breath. You keep coming back to the breath, and you begin to see more things over time. The process may be gradual, so gradual that you hardly notice. The image in the canon is of a carpenter using a hammer. He knows that as he holds the hammer and uses it every day to pound away at the nails, the handle of the hammer is getting worn down. In any one day he can't measure how much it has been worn down, but over time he begins to see the wear marks. Someday it will wear completely through. It's the same with progress in the mind. Sometimes it's incremental, but that doesn't mean it's any less real. The important thing is to be willing to learn the little things, notice the little things, master the little things, because it's in mastering the little things that the larger issues become clear. If you try to tackle the big issues right away, your basic character flaws or whatever, you're dealing mainly with abstractions, and abstractions can hide all kinds of stuff. They may sound big, important, impressive, but when you actually look at them, you see that there's not much there. They're a smokescreen. The important things are hidden, and all you see is the smoke. So try to develop the attitude that you're willing to learn any lesson, no matter how small. And that's the attitude that will see you through. As we draw curtains on today's session, we extend an invitation for ongoing participation. Just as Buddha advocated sharing and supporting his teachings for the greater good, we urge your involvement. Aid in spreading these profound teachings universally by subscribing, liking, and sharing. Your active role ensures these invaluable insights transcend boundaries. Seize this chance to spark positive change and nurture empathy. We eagerly await your presence in future episodes, uniting to illuminate minds and cultivate compassion worldwide. Wilderness Lessons. March 6, 2008. Ajahn Fuang once commented that when Ajahn Mun went into the forest traveling to different caves and mountains, he always went with a purpose. There was a reason for his going. It wasn't that he simply wanted a change of scenery or have a good time. He knew either that it would be a good place to meditate or that there were people there or beings there who might benefit from his teaching. Only if there was a reason would he go. I mention this because tomorrow some of you are going to go up to the mountain to spend the day in the forest there. It's good to think about why you're going, what you hope to accomplish, what you hope to gain from it, and who you may hope to help up there. There are lots of lessons that can be learned from being out there. One that the Buddha noted was that when you go into the forest and hold the perception of wilderness in your mind is very different from when it has the perception of being in society. He contrasts the village perception and human being perception with the wilderness perception. The village and human being perceptions carry with them all the affairs of the people you have to deal with, all the issues that go around living in a village. And even though we live here in a forest monastery, there's a kind of a village here. So one thing you can notice when you go into the wilderness is how your mind changes. You can see a difference in the level of disturbance in your mind between being here where you have responsibilities and going up there where the responsibilities are very different. That's primarily a difference in perception. If you wanted to, you could carry all the village issues up the mountain with you, but you wouldn't be taking advantage of the opportunity to see the difference perception can make. You're not just going to a different place, you're carrying around a different perception of yourself and your surroundings. This is a classic case of bhava, or becoming. It's based on a perception, which in turn is based on an intention, in this case the desire to get up on the mountain and let down some of the burdens and responsibilities of being here at the monastery. So there's a lesson you can learn right there. The power of perception over the level of stress or lack of stress in your mind. When you've learned that power, bring it back here. We live in a world where wilderness for the most part is compassed of little islands of wildness surrounded by a sea of civilization. In the past it wasn't that way. Civilization formed the islands, and the wilderness was the sea. We have a slight taste of that here in the monastery. We've got chaparral on 3 sides. We live in an orchard, but it's an orchard surrounded by wilderness. There are wilderness animals out there, and often they come infiltrating into the orchard, foraging for what they can find. They draw no lines in their heads between wilderness and civilization. In the same way, try to keep that sense of wilderness infiltrating your mind here, so that even as you return here and carry out your responsibilities, there's an element of wilderness aerating those responsibilities to keep them from being quite so heavy. You're free to shift into that perception at any time. Remember also that wilderness isn't all just relaxation and openness. You have to be careful, there are dangers there. Our romanticized notion of nature tends to forget this. Being in the wilderness means you have to be careful. At present there may not be any wild animals up there that are going to attack you, but you have to be careful as you hike around. We've had wilderness trips in the past where people came back all scarred from being careless. The rocks and other sharp things up there on the mountain don't have the padded corners we often expect in society, so you have to be alert. This is another lesson that wilderness teaches: heedfulness, alertness. And you're not alone out there. In the Buddha's cosmology, there are devas in the trees, devas in the mountains. When Ajahn Mun went to caves in mountains and forests, he would give thought to the other beings there. He would chant for them, he would spread goodwill, so that he was actually bringing something to them. And he'd often have to be careful not to offend them. There are stories of his going into caves where monks who had been there before had offended the resident devas by their lack of circumspection, by their general lack of manners. So keep that in mind as well. What energy are you taking up there? Do you know the manners of the forest? One of the manners of the forest is you're always very clean and neat. That story I told today about Ajahn Lee and the banana grove. His comment on not leaving banana peels lying around applies to all kinds of situations in the forest, and not just to banana groves that appear through psychic power. Be careful of what you say, be careful of what you think, be careful of your impact on the place. We had a weird incident years back up on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. We'd gone down from our camping spot on Parisawampat's Point to the nearby spring, a natural spring in a lovely meadow surrounded by spruce, pines, and aspen. As we were driving down, the guy who was driving, he was a real estate appraiser, happened to notice one little corner of the meadow that was especially pretty. He thought to himself, gee, that would be a nice place to build a house. Immediately he sensed a presence there that said, no, go away. You're not wanted here. Before long we got down to the spring. It's a spring that's been covered up by cement to keep the water clean, and there's a little cement cover on the top. It takes 1 or 2 people just to lift up the cover, so you can get to the water. And it so happened that someone had left the cover open, and a crow had gotten into the spring and died, which meant that we couldn't use the water in the spring at all. So you need to have manners when you go in the forest. At the same time, try to receive what the forest has to offer. Walk mindfully through the forest, walk with alertness through the forest, open your eyes to what's there around you. Years back when I was first staying with Ajahn Fuang, One of his lay students came and invited him to visit an orchard over in Chanthaburi. Ajahn Fuang took me along. The orchard bordered on a forest with a nice creek running through it. So we went and sat in meditation on the edge of the creek. After a while, Ajahn Fuang, who was maybe about 20 or 30 yards away, threw a stone into the creek to splash me. I opened my eyes and noticed that he was walking around, looking at the trees. I suddenly realized that's what he wanted me to do. Not just sit there with my eyes closed, but look. Ajahn Lee tells of the many lessons you learn by looking in the forest. How trees survive, how the animals survive. The main lesson Ajahn Lee picked up from the forest was heedfulness. You have to be very watchful. You can't be complacent. To survive in difficult situations, you have to learn to be quiet. When you go to a new place, always be quiet. Watch. See what you can learn. If you go in with the attitude that you already know everything you need to know, and this applies to all areas of life, all the lessons that are there just waiting to be picked up get ignored. So go both to give and to receive, to contemplate. The mountains suffered a fire recently, so look at the ravages of the fire as you go there. You notice that some plants are already beginning to sprout. Parts of the mountain are beginning to look green again. But other parts, huge parts of the mountain, are still black. There's a lesson in karma right there. Some of your actions are things that you can quickly recover from. Others leave deep scars for long periods of time. Another lesson in heedfulness. So look around and see what kind of lessons you can learn while you're up there. Make it a Dhamma exploring trip, not just a picnic, as I heard one of you say. Use your ears, use your eyes, and keep your mind alert for the lessons of the forest. The National Park Service sign says take only pictures and memories, leave only footprints. Well, our attitude is to give what you can of your goodwill and bring back whatever lessons you can learn for training the mind.